Welcome back to the Harbor. I'm your host, the Kino Cowboy. I'm here with my co-host Scott Keith. Today we're talking about another Edward Yang. Last year, I think it last summer or the year before when we did A Brighter
It was
Summer
it was
Day.
last summer.
Yeah, we did Brighter Summer Day, one of our lowest viewed episodes.
Really?
Yeah,
It's that bad? Oh, so we're at it again.
we're at it again with a his final film before he died called Yi Yi. And in Taiwanese, over there it means one by one or one after another. But if you say that here where we live, it's after you spit tobacco into a cup because it's like yeehaw, partner. And that's kind of a funny thing, I guess. But
The upcoming total eclipse is not the darkest thing, the darkest shadow to cast itself over this godforsaken state we call Arkansas.
yeah. Now, I will say it is a unfortunate circumstance that the day we record this is happened to be the day that Taiwan was devastated by
And
earthquakes.
and we didn't cause it for the algorithm.
Yeah, it
We
wasn't
had
us.
nothing to do with it.
We weren't using that to our advantage. I feel like I said that because of we did uh last week Scott Derrickson announced he was remaking the film that we did last week, like the day before we recorded. And I was like, wow, what a coincidence. And now way worse. This
Yeah.
but either way.
By the third time we do an Edward Yang film, the next time the People's Republic of China is going to invade
Yeah,
Taiwan.
next episode, Red Dawn, look out, dude. No, but this film
And our
I
hearts go out to Taiwan, by the way.
yeah, of
Not
course.
trying to make light of it.
Yeah,
It's just a weird
it
coincidence.
is very weird. But this film I wanted to check out because I'm a big slice of life kind of guy. And this has a lot of drama, but it does have that slice of life element that I like, and I think I prefer this movie to A Brighter Summer Day overall.
Oh, me too, absolutely. If for nothing else, it's kind of easier to understand and follow the plot.
Yeah. And I like family dramas. And always like even the first time I watched The Godfather, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, I gotta figure, okay, this person's husband and this person's daughter, and I'm like, okay, so like,
We talked about that last time.
yeah,
We compared it a lot to The Godfather, and that was a crime movie.
yeah,
And the first time I watched The Godfather when I was 15 or whatever, yeah, I thought the same thing, you know. And then the second time I appreciated it more, and then the third time I watched it, I was like, okay, this is a masterpiece.
right,
Which I liked it the first time as well. And I enjoyed A Brighter Summer Day. On this podcast, I have called it the best film I'll never rewatch. For instance, after watching this, because once you get a better grip of his style and what he's trying to do, it makes watching subsequent films easier, I think.
yeah,
And
totally,
as I just said, I think this is just an easier narrative to follow than with some of the referencing off-screen characters from different gangs and leaving out certain plot points intentionally.
yeah,
That's the main thing with A Brighter Summer Day. I can't even remember exactly, but I know for a fact that with Edward Yang and the Taiwanese New Wave, they will just leave out important plot points, and you just kind of got to fill in the gaps.
which is also kind of how life works, especially if you're the POV of like a kid or a teenager, you're not getting the full grasp of like the family dynamics and like situations that might be going on. Like I remember being a small kid and like my grandparents in the hospital. My grandmother was in the hospital for like 3 months. It was like this big deal, but I was only getting like bits and pieces of it while doing my own thing. And that's what I really liked about Yang Yang's part of this movie. It reminded me a lot of my own childhood in that way while big things were going on.
Dude, and all Yang Yang has to be based on Edward Yang. First of all, his name is Yang
Yeah.
Yang. And second of all, he gets obsessed with taking photos and photography. And he's this dorky little kid. He's 8 years old, but he seems small for his age for me.
Yeah.
Gets picked on a lot by the hall monitors or whatever they have over there
Yeah.
in their school system equivalent. You know,
We never had a hall monitor at my school. I don't think.
we would just have some teacher standing out there yelling
It's
at
like
us.
what kid's gonna miss class to like watch the hall? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, that's a weird television myth, I think.
Yeah.
Also, we're talking about this like we didn't go to the same high school, so
I was talking more like elementary or
No,
like
we
middle
didn't have
school.
that.
I guess we went to the same middle school,
Yeah, I didn't know you
but
back.
whatever.
But I don't know. Whatever their thing. I don't know. I don't know if it's the same, and I'm not trying to draw an equivalency between all East Asian cultures, but in Japan, the students clean the school. So I don't know if in Taiwan they have more of a, even if they don't do that, if they have more of a role in enforcing policy or, just doing things
Yeah.
around the school. Um, but I do actually love that of watching a culture that's pretty foreign, more foreign than say Italian cinema or other Western cinema, which is always the appeal of this and why I think people miss out by not watching films with subtitles, or even just not watching these films. If the only Asian stuff you've seen is anime, which doesn't necessarily count all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe I mean there's some slice of life anime where you might get some school depictions, but it's a bit different. Certainly not shonen. But uh, my point is, what I love about world cinema is I really get a view of a culture that I can't get by just reading about a culture. That's one of my, I guess, a pet peeve is people who are almost like, well, why would you read a fiction when you could just read nonfiction? There aren't a ton of those people out there, but I've met them before.
Yeah.
And it's because you build empathy. And instead of reading about something, you see something in action and contextualize, even if it's a fictional context. Um, and you're able to see that. And I mean, this is really interesting because from everything I've read online, I feel like this is obviously set at the time, modern day, turn of the century, and it feels like it in a good way. Um,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, in odd ways, feels like my childhood, where there were.
That's why I was drawn to it so much. It's like I had the allure of watching a different culture and have a just a slice of this different culture from completely different country I don't know that much about compared to say like France or
Albania.
Italy
Yeah.
or something. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But it's also like it takes place like it was shot in like late 99 and that's some of my earliest memories as a child. So when I see this little kid running around doing this random stuff, it's very nostalgic for me even if it is a very different culture. And I would like to point out that there is a shot where you can see the Phantom Menace poster in the background, and
I
that
yeah, I did
it
notice.
hit
I
like
was
a
wondering if we are gonna
brick.
talk. I literally yeah. It's you can see that, and you can see Wild Wild West.
Yeah,
And
it's
some
just
De
like
Niro movie. I don't know what that was. Was that Casino or something?
I don't know, but it was just like my earliest memories are from that time period, so it hit extra hard,
Yeah, I
and I
have a few.
like
I have memories from and I'm a year older than you, which is not much, but it is when you're talking about core memory sort of stuff. I do remember some of the mid '90s, some of the stuff that was going on, vaguely. Um, but you definitely get a sense, and I've read people in my research, people who like have more knowledge of Taiwan or might be Taiwanese American or have some sort of connection to it. Um, this really does, you feel the transition into a more westernized Taiwan, and that's looming in the background all the time. Um,
literally NY Bagels, which they go to several times.
yeah, they go to NY Bengals. Yang Yang doesn't want to eat the food at the wedding, so they take him to McDonald's because he's a soft boy, and which is I feel I would do that because I was a picky eater as a kid.
Yeah,
So I've eaten McDonald's in lieu of whatever the adults were eating because my parents just didn't want to deal with my BS. Um, and a lot of things. And I don't know, there's is that making the kids soft? Because there's this weird tension even of how do we raise these kids and how do we continue to raise them in Taiwan? It's still a new country, but it's not like a brighter summer day where they're first generation. These are like third, fourth generation Taiwanese at this point. And in terms of being separate from the People's Republic of China,
yeah,
obviously Taipei, the city, was there, you know, however long. And I don't know a ton about the history. Um, but you even have that thematically when Ting Ting was she's raising that plant and she overwaters the plant, which I've done. I've killed cactuses. People are like, cactus are easy to raise.
I'm
I'm
no
like, I have
good
such
with
a
it.
dude, I have such a black thumb. I just like walk by like I'm one of the horsemen of the apocalypse. I'm just pestilence. Like I kill plants. Um,
Yeah, that bonsai tree, those little bonsai trees they had in that Japanese store at Epcot. I was like, maybe I should get one of these. And I'm like, no, that's a fool's errand. I'll fucking somehow kill that thing.
I kill everything. I kill everything. Relationships, jokes, everything. But uh, it, it and it's hard because you're raising things move so fast now, and they're only moving faster. You're raising your kids in a world that didn't exist
Yeah,
when you were a kid, so you can't just raise them the same way. Um, and also, this family is kind of dysfunctional in a lot of ways. Um, just
but also very
baby
realistic to
mamas.
me. A lot of families, it's not like that crazy to me. Like a lot of families happen to be this level of dysfunctional, I
Yeah,
feel.
I think this is a very realistic, very common level of dysfunction.
Yeah.
Um, of just okay, getting married because they're pregnant. But Adi is so dang superstitious, which is another Chinese thing, just that I can't comment too much upon. But this obsession with luck and
That drove
also,
me crazy.
yeah, yeah, Adi's a
He put off
frustrating.
the wedding 4 months so his baby, or he put out like so the baby, so it could be on the luckiest day or whatever. And then the grandma has a stroke, and even that he's like, well, at least it was on the luckiest day, so she'll probably be okay, right? Like that's a terrible way to think. That-
Yeah, and this guy's making business investments, which it's this kind of old way of thinking, spiritual way of thinking in a modernizing economy, in a global economy. It just doesn't work clearly.
yeah,
um but I don't know how much Chinese belief kind of, if that's a commentary on how your traditional beliefs, you try to hang on to them, but they become dysfunctional in a modern society. Also, Adi's just kind of a doofus. The
yeah,
the character, he's just dumb.
totally.
Um, does some dumb stuff. The whole movie, every scene, he pretty much does something dumb, and he's always getting drunk with his college buddies while his baby mama is just standing there, barely having any lines in the movie, which is intentional because she's so sidelined in her own life
Yeah,
that she's just overshadowed by her husband at all times. Um,
yeah. And when you were talking about feeding the kid McDonald's at the wedding, there, I feel like that is like okay, let's just have the least amount of stress or worry. It'll be fine this time. Let's just not have a big scene with the kid. We're just gonna feed him McDonald's because it's a wedding. And then, but of course, there is a scene where what's her name comes in. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't good enough to marry your grandson, and this is this. It's like, dude, why would you come in there and like, ugh, it just makes me
oh
anxious.
no, that part's cinematic. That part
Yeah.
is
That's cinematic, but it's like
I've been to some weddings and there's dysfunctional families, but that's pretty up there.
I just don't know. I'm engaged, so I think extra hard about like what ways could someone try and ruin my wedding when
Oh,
I
I think about that about your wedding constantly. How I'm gonna ruin your wedding. How I'm gonna get up there. It should have been me.
you're gonna run in like Shrek. I object.
I'm gonna run in dressed as
Yeah,
Shrek.
you're dressed as Shrek. That'd be pretty crazy.
Yeah,
I
you'd
wouldn't
be
have
okay
anything to
with that.
say. Parker might be mad, but I'd be like, you know what? Respect. Can't do
You'd be like,
anything.
Parker, it's for the bit, okay?
Yeah, dude.
It's a bit we talked about on the podcast, so it's okay.
Yeah. And that would make me look great. But yeah, I do like so yang yang. Like I was saying, like it just reminds me of distant memories I have as a kid, and I feel like I don't know for a long time growing up, like as a little kid, I was just kind of wandering around wherever my mom took me. I felt like I was just spectating a lot of shit. I didn't feel like a true like sentient being in a body until I was like 10 or 11. And I remember feeling this way, like feeling like, oh, I'm someone in a body. I have my own autonomy. I could do what I want kind of thing. It was like really strange.
It is a
And
strange thing. For me, it was more of a gradient. By 8, I started to feel like my own. I think 8 is when a lot of cultures start seeing it's the age of innocence is over. I think for certain Christian, like Mormons and stuff. I could be wrong about that. again, no idea what is with the Chinese. You definitely feel that though. In this,
Yeah.
I relate to that kid a lot because he's obviously kind of a neurotic and doesn't really fit in and has trouble sticking up for himself. And yeah, that was me. That was me. I'm the kind of guy who grows up to have a film podcast. Like, yeah, of course.
Well, it's just yeah, I really, yeah, I liked his character. He's kind of this through line, especially because it ends on him and what he says at the funeral. And I just find that really fascinating. And I think about
Tribulation
how,
makes him a man.
well, yeah, well, I was babied, as a kid. I was sheltered, so like,
I was in a lot
I
of
don't know.
ways.
He just kind of comes into his own for a minute there when he starts messing around with photography, and I feel bad that scene where like the teacher makes him turn against the wall and they all like make fun of his photos, which
Call
they
it
jokingly called avant-garde. It's like, fuck you, dude.
that's a very upsetting scene. And I
Yeah.
mean that unironically.
Yeah.
Because, I would not be surprised if that was taken directly from Edward Yang's life.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes I think in America we go too far into praising kids' artwork when it's not good, but which is a
Yeah.
terrible thing to say. But every culture has their own take on it. I remember I met this Scottish guy once who was like, "Yeah, if kids' artwork is bad, we don't praise it. We don't do anything." I'm like, "Yeah, it's why you're such a barrel of laughs." But no, it's a really frustrating thing. Especially, when I taught, um, and maybe this is a cultural thing because we're just in Spain, but like it was kind of hard to get the kids to do anything creative these days. And I think that's generally I've seen that in American students too, when I've worked in American schools. So just to discourage that is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
There seems to be Yang seems to be critical of this idea that everything needs to be productive. I think in my research he dropped out of what was it, UCLA film school or something, one of those film schools, one of the big ones, USC, something like that. um Basically because it was more focused on commercial films, which he was not as interested in. So he went into engineering and did all that. So I'm sure NJ, New Jersey, who's one of the characters here, every time they said his name, I just couldn't stop thinking like, "Hey, I'm fucking from Taiwan, you know." Uh, like,
Capicola.
yeah, I mean, Capicola and Taipei, yeah, but um,
Right. Yeah, it's
he
like,
seems to be critical of this idea that everything needs to have some sort of economic value attached to it. Which, if you're coming out of the collective trauma of having to flee the mainland and establish a new life, I completely get that. With the 20th century, I think in Chinese it's called the century of humiliation because there was so much strife and infighting and different wars, and of course Maoism just ended up starving millions of people. um and because you see it when they're talking about music. He's talking about music with Kojima, who's basically Hideo Kojima. He's a Kojima type Oda, the Japanese video game developer.
yeah.
um he talked about, he had his old flame, who's a big part of the movie, uh, kind of criticize a lot of music for not having economic value. And there's even this idea they can find a cheap ripoff of this Oda guy. And if the economic value is the same, even though the artistic value isn't, or you don't have a real good working relationship with the guy, and we never see the knockoff. Um, which again I think is a commentary like on his own Chinese culture of this like very results driven, but at the cost of all else, and
Yeah, the most efficient possible. Yeah.
most efficient possible, but often cutting corners
Yeah.
to do it. Which is I'm not trying to make any big statements here, but like I've talked to people who have worked with Chinese companies and expressed that frustration. I don't have the personal experience with it, but I've just heard that, or even yeah. I won't go too far into that because we are in a weird spot with China.
Mm.
China's an interesting place right now. I mean, so are we. But they're dealing with their own stuff. Housing bubbles, huge real estate bubbles in China.
Yeah.
Um, but not that this movie's about it, but it's interesting to watch it in this day and age. Because the conversation has changed since the Phantom Menace was in theaters.
Yeah. That also feels like a reflection of I of films that people criticize, basically plot cells who criticize, oh, every dialogue, every scene must push the plot forward in every way. And it's like what they perceive to be the plot is, of course. They don't understand that it's all a piece of the puzzle. And like you don't realize how the sum of its parts can really be a lot of different sequences coming together for one kind of collage. And so it just bugs the shit out of me that people like, well, like producers, what they want to trim down. Oh, we don't need this scene. We don't need this scene. Well, you're cutting out part of the movie. You don't realize it, and that's just why it bothers me that people. This movie comes up. I see lists on TikTok of like this and like even just like I don't know other things that might be considered slice of life, even though this really is just a drama. But they're like top 10 movies where nothing happens. I'm like, what do you mean nothing happens? That doesn't make any sense.
That's also just people trying. Are they actually are they criticizing the movie in these
No, they're
TikToks?
like my favorite movies where nothing happens. I'm like, what do you?
Because you're dumbing down your idea to fit the attention span of your average TikToker. How much content, quote unquote, is made? I was thinking this the other day. How much content is made to have on a second screen on Netflix or whatever streaming service, to have on a second screen, to have something in the background while potheads scroll on their phones and smoke weed? Like here, like seriously, I'm dead serious.
That's
Like
a lot of these originals.
a
Like
lot of these originals means are especially a lot of these adult animated
background TV.
movies.
That's what it is now. Yeah.
And here's the thing, it's kind of come full circle because TV was always sort of a background thing. I mean, yes, you come together as a family and watch it, but something like Police Squad, which preceded The Naked Gun, one of the reasons that it didn't do well is that it had so many visual gags that you had to be watching. You had to be actively paying attention to the television show. And I'll put on things in the background sometimes. I'll a lot of times something I've already watched, if I'm cooking or something.
Well, yeah, if it's like Futurama or King of the Hill, I've seen 100 fucking times, then yeah, that's totally a good background show. And I do kind of miss having cable because as a kid, you'd throw stuff on and it would just be running in the background while you're doing stuff. I get that appeal, but like not for like movies like this. Like
No, for movies, no.
Looney Tunes, sure, like I
But
don't
now
know.
Looney Tunes, I think you got to sit and
Well,
watch
no,
just because Disney.
I did, but there is like a an appeal of like, oh, I've seen this movie before. I flip to it. It's 20 minutes in. Screw it. I'll put it on and sit down and watch. It's on. There was this feeling of like you don't have a full commitment because you already came into it. I don't know.
Right,
But
no, 20 minutes late so I can do laundry or whatever I have to
yeah,
do while this plays in the
but it's
background.
shit that I've already seen usually. But I don't know. We had a similar discussion when we did Days and Confused. That's more of like a straight out hangout movie, but it does have this. That's why I like this movie so much. Is the kind of slice of life feel, even though there is some heavy drama throughout it.
There's some heavy drama. What's amazing to me is Edward Yang is able to make something that feels so epic in scope and multi-generational. We've compared it to The Godfather, but also incredibly intimate at the same time.
Yeah,
And he's able to do that because it's 3 hours and because it has scenes that there are plenty of scenes in this movie and shots in this movie that you could cut out and affect. Yeah, the plot wouldn't change and you would have all the information you need, but certain character moments would be omitted. Certain thematic underscores would be omitted. Um,
just
and it's
simple
just
stuff
pacing.
like Adi, I think that's his name, maybe, where just he's taking the time to like film his newborn baby in the hospital and stuff, and he's just kind of looking at the footage. It could have just cut to them in the hospital holding the baby, you know what I mean? But it's just that extra stuff that makes it feel so much like real life to me. And that's why if it's one of those movies, it's like I just want to chill in this movie and like kind of kick my feet back, relax, soak it
Hospitals
up.
are weird.
Yeah.
Hospitals are weird liminal spaces
Yeah.
where people are born and die. And if you've ever been in a hospital waiting or just like waiting around, let's say you have an older family member who's getting an operation or something, time almost moves differently in a
Yeah.
hospital. It's bizarre. I kind of think about people who work there every day and how
Yeah. And for like 12-hour shifts.
yeah.
Fuck.
It's just an odd environment. Um, and I think this movie captures that. But it
Totally.
captures that in a lot of scene, and even just you need that slow pacing for a wedding that just drags on. Like if you've ever been to a Mexican wedding, I had a cousin who married a Mexican, and that wedding it was like 2 a.m. and I'm like, all right, I'm going home. This is going on too long.
I-
Uh,
I've only been to milk toast weddings.
oh yeah, nah, you need a Mexican wedding, dude. They're fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should just not marry your fiance and marry a Mexican woman for the just so I can go to another Mexican wedding.
Yeah. The and then you get focus shifts like, okay, this is the wedding, but the real shift is on NJ inadvertently meeting an old flame he hasn't seen in 30 years, which sets up his path on this movie where he's kind of feeling burnt out, lackadaisical, just not really sure of what he wants. And he's just like, we see scenes of him like sitting listening to music in his office. There's even like a scene where he's just walking around with like a pigeon on his shoulder and stuff while people talk.
No,
And I
he's
don't,
watching. He's watching Oda have a pigeon on his
oh
shoulder.
yeah, well, either way, I don't know. So that's a fascinating thing. And then you get to like the baby shower or whatever, and it's what's his name's ex shows up,
Yeah,
and
Union or whatever.
yeah,
Audie's ex. Yeah, I think Union is her name. She shows up. Um, and but
I,
then the bride goes crazy. The mother.
yeah,
And I understand why she'd be upset,
yeah.
but the whole family. I mean, that felt like some white trash Real Housewives shit.
Well, she kicked him out, and then he went to his ex because he didn't feel like he had anywhere else to go, and she helped him out with some stuff, and then he got back with her when she had the baby. Yeah, it does feel like a some trashy subplot, but it's done in such a different way. I don't know,
Yeah, because
but
this feels like a pretty upper middle class family.
yeah, and to live in that high rise they live in, you can't just do nothing.
No, dad's a successful engineer. They have a single income. I bet you can't do that today in Taipei. I bet it's way too expensive.
Yeah. Anyway, NJ's head is in the clouds regardless, and a lot of things are getting to him at once. And like his wife has to go dip out when her mom has the coma, so he's kind of just stuck doing shit without her. And then of course his flame comes up, and it's like the opportune time. I don't know. It's an interesting path to follow.
It is an interesting path. It's interesting that the mother realizes she has nothing, which is a terrifying thing.
Yeah.
For all the people advocating having trad wives now.
Yeah.
The She goes to a Buddhist retreat, but I don't think it results in anything. And I think Edward Yang is almost against the idea of enlightenment, or not even against the idea of enlightenment, but he's against the idea of easy answers for sure.
Because it was just a distraction. Yeah, I think she couldn't handle that, the accepting that her mom was going to die. It's very likely. And so she just opted out. And I think that's kind of cowardly in a way, but also I do feel bad because he comes home and she's crying, and she's realized that she keeps telling the mom the same thing every day. And like that is shitty to realize, wow, my life is that boring and repetitive and I'm actually unhappy.
I don't know.
Realistic though.
I think a lot of people's lives are that boring.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you anything. If I talked about my day, you wouldn't be interested. That's most days. This is the most interesting part of my day.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get that, but it's like deceptively, that's an example of how this movie's deceptively mundane because it's just rich. It's just the philosophy of life, really, just an example of life. I don't know. That's why I like it so much.
No, it is, and I feel like Eastern storytelling often it doesn't always come out and say its thesis. Um,
Yeah.
for example, just the way we were taught to write in high school of okay, you set up your thesis statement at the beginning and then you support it. I've heard several times that in like China, for instance, a lot of it's reversed where you kind of have this coalescing of multiple strains of thought at the end of an essay or at the end of a speech, um, which it's just a more interesting way of going about it, and it puts more it puts the ball in the audience's part more.
Yeah.
And they have to participate more. It's obvious and it also seems more subtle, less aggressive, less Western in that sense. But it comes out when I watch filmmaking from this part of the world, and you have that even more. It's kind of like a sliding scale. This is really on that far part of the scale of just like it coming together in the end, and then you have a lot of your already your European movies, your Lain and stuff like that, or your Fellini that kind of comes together. And Hollywood, I feel like, is on the opposite end of the spectrum where stuff just needs to be spoon fed to you.
Yeah. Like I like that really the film follows like there's characters that come in and out, but it's like, okay, we're following the dad, his teenage daughter, Ting Ting, and his young son, Yang Yang. And it kind of just goes back and forth between those three narratives, which I don't think is too much at all, considering I did it in my own book, the same thing. But for Yang Yang, it's an undercurrent that becomes the through line, and certain just little aspects of his day to day remind me of my own childhood when he gets accused of having a condom that he brought to school and he gets humiliated, but it's just a balloon in his pocket. That reminds me of just, and he asks like, I don't know what that is. What is a condom? I did the same thing in seventh grade. I know that's probably too old to not know what a condom was, but like someone said, but Cheery's putting a condom on his clarinet because I was just fucking around with some plastic in band class. And I was like, what's a condom? And everyone laughed at me. I felt humiliated. Just like, okay, I'm sorry
Yeah,
I
you
sheltered.
idiot.
Yeah,
Stupid 12-year-old Adrian.
I know. But it also reminds me of this time in fifth grade. And a reminder to people, I was sheltered, okay? I don't know anything. I didn't know all kinds of stuff, I don't know. And my teacher in fifth grade didn't like me for some reason, which bugged the shit out of me because I was just this fucking nothing kid, I don't know why she would just not like me. She was an old bitch, basically.
Yeah,
You can
there's
ask my
there's
mom.
there's definitely teachers who are just old and crotchety.
My mom would agree. She could never understand what her beef was with me. It made no sense. But um the kids will just like break balls and like make shit up just to get you in trouble and stuff. And our good pal Patrick was he randomly decided to tell the teacher that I said the N-word. And I had no idea what that was. I had no concept of racial slurs in the slightest. I had no idea what he was even talking about. And the teacher pulled me outside into the hallway and she's like, I know what you said. Cameron said this, this, and this. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you said the N word. And I was like, well, what is the N word? She says, don't play dumb with me. You know what that word is. And I was like, almost in tears, like, no, I don't. What word are you talking about? I didn't say anything. And she's like, well, you know. And then she says it to me. And I'm like, what is that? And she just like huffed and puffed and like gave up and like sent me back into class. But
So
it's like
you
I
got her
still,
to say it?
yeah,
That's pretty impressive.
I didn't know what she was saying. And it was just like that kind of shit that happens that sticks with you.
It really does. Being a kid is terrible. A lot of people, I hated it. I was in trouble a lot. I was sent to the office a lot. I had a lot of trouble in school, not academically, but behaviorally, just because
Yeah.
I was an angsty kid. And I would remember things like that where the teacher would accuse me of something, or just being talked down to, and treated like you don't know anything. And it's hard because if you're a teacher, I mean, I've been on the other end of it where I've had to corral 30 different kids acting a fool, and you can't give every kid the time and attention that they deserve, and it breaks your heart. um
Yeah.
but we've grown, and now when you say the N word, you know exactly what it means.
There's also things like you feel very guilty about as a teenager, and then you just don't realize the bigger picture, and then I don't know. I thought of this when Ting Ting, like one of the main aspects of the movie is that she has guilt that she thinks it might be her fault because she forgot to take out the garbage because that's when the grandmother was found on the ground, was outside taking the garbage out. So she's living with this guilt this whole time. But like the likelihood that the grandma was going to have a stroke anyway was very high, considering she wanted to go home after the wedding before the reception because she wasn't feeling good. So it was pretty much going to happen anyway. And so that is when you're a teenager, you don't have a good way of rationalizing some of these things. And of course, if it's your family member, you're going to feel like shit. It's not necessarily just a teenage thing, but it is something I thought about. So I don't know. And then
No, feel like these kids have a lot of weight on them and expectations on them. Um, I had a Taiwanese friend growing up actually, and I always noticed that. I mean, his parents were from there, and he was a first generation American or whatever you call it. And yeah, they were pretty hard on him. They're like, "All right, you're 3 years old, you're taking violin lessons," that sort of thing. I think he's a doctor now,
which is
so
like a stereotype, but true.
no, it's that immigrant mentality of
Yeah,
like, hey, you're gonna have to work twice as hard to, you know,
yeah,
get what these like, frankly, like what these white people are just gonna get handed to
sure,
them.
yeah.
Which is why I'm so mediocre in my 30s.
It's like, no, but I don't know. That's I don't know.
Asian parents, man. I
Such
remember
a
one time I was talking with a friend, and I was like, and they were like, blah, my parents this, my parents that. And I said, well, you're a grown woman. You can do what you want. You don't have to listen to them. And then she reminded me, Scott, my parents are Asian. I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot that. Never mind. You can't. I'm coming at it from the wrong perspective. I can't just, it's not like I'm talking to one of my white friends.
but that's part of the reason I really was attracted to this movie is that realistic representation of adolescence. Kind of like Yang Yang holding his breath in the water in the sink. Like that's stupid shit that I would do. He's like taking up the bathroom time just to do that because of that girl who like likes him but treats him like shit because that's what girls did when they secretly like you, I guess.
Right.
But
And he's a little cuck boy who likes it.
yeah.
Um,
And like
okay, since we brought it up, dude, fuck Edward Yang for making me think for a minute that he had drowned and died.
yeah, that
You know,
was a weird choice of like I don't know how the purpose behind that.
I don't either, but I thought if they had done it like that, it just would have been unnecessarily cruel to the audience.
Yeah.
It just would like, what's the point of this? You're just
Maybe it's just like the kid can get into trouble. Like this could be, I don't know, an easy way for him to hurt himself. I don't know. But also it does that earlier in the movie with the brother where he like you think like maybe he like drowned in the bath or something, but there was just like a gas leak, and you think for a moment he's dead because he's lying nude on the ground while she's like crying over him, but he's fine. And in the next scene, it's like, oh shit, okay, he's
so.
still
What do
alive.
you think the gas leak was intentional? They tried to kill himself with the gas leak.
I don't really know. I think it's kind of up in the air to me. Maybe
It
I'm
is
wrong.
up in the air. I'm leaning toward he was just drunk and had a moment where he tried to commit suicide, but it was obviously ill thought out.
Yeah, that's probably what it was, but I feel like it's for some reason pretty uh it could be either way. I don't
Yeah,
know. Especially
it's
because
ambiguous.
when we compare it to the Yang Yang scene of where is he drowning? What's going on? I don't know. It's an interesting choice. I'll say that. But
It is, and I tend to believe that. it was intentional just because that shows character more. But it also weirdly that sort of scare brings what's her name? Xiao Yang, whatever, the bride and Adi closer together in a weird way.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of the for the plot cells out there, in terms of the plot, that's why that's in there.
Yeah, which it's kind of fucked because if he was drunk and tried to kill himself, that's a shitty reason for them to get closer. But whatever works, I guess.
There are
Raise
some people with some dysfunctional freaking
raise the kid.
yeah, I.
But so you get that kind of depiction of adolescence with him, and then you get the other depiction of adolescence with Ting Ting, with her friend, her new friend, her neighbor friend, and then her friend Fatty, uh, which is a
Why?
shitty.
Yeah, why, and I don't know why he's called Fatty.
Yeah, they say she even comments like, "Oh, he's skinny. Why is he called that?" Oh, I don't know. He needs to
Doesn't
be
make any
fat.
sense.
Like that's so. Like if
Does he have
imagine
a
being
chode?
imagine being called fatty because in fourth grade you're a fat fuck, and then you actually lean out as a kid and they still call you fatty. That
Yeah,
would
like a lot of
devastate
kids get chubby right before puberty, and that
me. Yeah, fuck that, dude. Kids are mean, dude.
it'd be like if you called Dwayne the Rock Johnson, like, "Hey, fatty."
It's like what the fuck, dude. But like there's this whole subplot with her and her friend, and then her friend is seeing Fatty, and then that doesn't go in anywhere. So she starts to maybe try and see if she's into Fatty, and they kind of like almost hook up at one point, and then they awkwardly like bitch out, or they wimp out, and it's just kind of this weird, awkward teenage shit. I like
It's because they don't really want to. They just do it because they're emulating what they
yeah,
think grown-ups are supposed to do.
which I
Um,
find fascinating. I love that kind of stuff. And there was one sequence that's like even like where she confronts her friends if she's seeing Fatty, and then she says no, and they just awkwardly stand in silence for like 30 seconds, and it like lingers on that. It's so realistic and awkward, and I love it. And it reminds me of the elevator scene in Evangelion with Asuka and Ray. It's just the same kind of weird, petty teenage girl shit.
I'm
So
trying to
funny.
remember that scene. Which scene is that?
It's just a scene in the elevator, notoriously in Evangelion, where they're uh uh Asuka's being a bitch to Ray, just like over Shinji, I think, and Ray just doesn't have shit to say because she's pretty much an empty husk at this point, and they kind of just Asuka just gives up, and then they just stand in the elevator waiting for it to go up. But because they're in Nerve headquarters, it's a long ass elevator ride,
Yeah, and
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 so
also because at that point in the show, the animation
yeah,
budget
they
was
needed
running
an
low.
animation break so they could save frames. So it just like it's like a minute long of them just standing in silence while they go up the elevator. It's so funny.
It
But
is incredibly awkward and
but
such a
you
passive
can't help it.
aggressive teen girl thing.
Yeah, it's like teen girl shit. It's so fun. Teen girl squad.
But it's all uh well, and this is all being mirrored through NJ and his love interest Sherry.
Yeah.
Um who does she just go to
She just
Tokyo?
flies to fucking Japan to meet up with him. She
Um
doesn't really have a big reason for it.
no, because I don't think she was part of the business dealings. I think it was just an excuse of like you'll be
Yeah,
away from your family,
which
so it
makes
won't
it
be weird if we
way
talk.
heavier, way worse to me.
No, it does. But they're trying to regress to adolescence, but they can't. While the kids are trying to advance to adulthood, and they can't.
Yes.
You know. And NJ is wise enough to realize this because he rejects advances. Also, like, what's he gonna do? Screw up his life? Um, but you are where you are. Um, and I think there's a lot of characters trying to get out of that. Um, Characters, Elaine, or no, sorry, that's an actress's name, Min Min, which is NJ's wife, trying to, not accept that this is the life she's made, that she is a housewife, or NJ, trying to say, he's in sort of a loveless marriage with Min Min, who they probably just got married because that was the best option.
Yeah.
And you have Adi, who can't accept the responsibility of being a father.
Yeah.
And you just have all these things where I think Edward Yang is trying to say, like, you are where you are, and that's
Yes.
and there's no way to accelerate it forward or go back, you know. And he's obsessed with time in that way, you know, not in a full Christopher Nolan way, but
I do like that NJ does accept this, like, even if it's by force, like he he does make sure to get two separate hotel rooms, and he does, to much to her giving him shit for it. And then he does have this in the back of his head, like what ifs with this woman. Like it is there, but he does accept, like, okay, I'm at this point in my life, it's for the best. It's for the best that she got up and left without even telling him. And it's for the best that he just goes back to his life.
do you
And
think
I
it's
do
for the
like
best? Do
that
you think it's for the
acceptance.
best that she just got up and left?
Yes, I think that's just the easiest way. It's better than making a mistake. Like he could have maybe hooked up with her and felt something briefly, but what would it have done for him
Do you think that
losing?
would have happened if they had met in the morning? What would have been different? What do you
I don't
think?
know. I don't know. It's, sometimes things just happen on a whim. I don't know.
Yeah, it is the safest.
Yeah. So I do like that aspect of it.
You know,
And it's
she
kind of
probably she
real.
probably wasn't though. She was just trying to spare herself. I don't think she was trying to spare NJ at that
Yeah,
point.
no, for sure. But I'm saying, like, it just by circumstance, it happened to protect him from even having the thought of screwing something up. So I don't know. It's realistic in that way. I do feel bad because he was reluctant to do this whole business exchange in the first place. And then they're screwing him over and like saying, oh no, we just got to dip and leave. We're leaving this guy. We're going for the cheaper option. And
Yeah,
it's
which doesn't work out anyway.
I know. And it's like he worked so hard to talk to this guy and like felt like a minor connection to this guy, I think. And I don't know. I think it was helping him kind of get his shit together in a way mentally.
It was because he's clearly checked out at this job and hates
Yeah.
it. Um, and I, I think he just hates the corporate environment. He's a man with integrity, and it's weird because you wouldn't think this of the character, but I mean, he's brave. I see him as a brave man and a brave
Yeah.
character, you
Totally.
know. And it's not very often that I just straight up admire a character the way I do NJ, um, and weirdly want to grow up to be like him,
No,
even
I totally get that.
even though he's only like 10 years older than me in this movie, but um, in the way I think he's the man that a lot of people should aspire to be. Um, and that not a lot of people are, you know, they take any chance they can to, you know, just act out of self-interest. And he doesn't, which is a beautiful
Totally.
thing.
I think there's some interesting visual motifs in this film. There's a lot of reflections in this movie,
Yes.
a lot of shots from the outside peering into another place through these reflections. I
I
find
think
that interesting.
Yang is really interested in the environments in which people are. I mean, there's not a lot of close-ups in this at all, nor are there in a brighter summer day.
Yeah.
And he's really interested in how the environment affects people. In this, a more urbanized Taipei versus a brighter summer day.
Yeah.
But both of the environments are claustrophobic to whomever's around them, and people are constrained by their environments. And you know, he really starts hammering home some of these motifs when Yang Yang starts getting into photography. Um, because I think Edward Yang is interested in all these objective shots. There's not a lot of subjective shots in these movies at all. There's a
Yeah.
few, like when Yang Yang is looking at the girl he's crushing on, kind of leering, almost using the male gaze intentionally. Um, but there's so much in this movie where it's all objective, and it's Yang Yang at one point asks his dad, NJ, you know, if you I can't see what you see, so how do I know what you see? Which is sort of a weird theory of mind thing for an 8-year-old to ask. But I think Edward really sees cinema as a means to bring everybody to the same perspective. And that's why he shoots objectively, because he is interested in that. but it's the thing I keep going back to. I don't know if I already said this, is this movie is so grand and epic and so intimate at the same time. It's
Yeah,
it's
totally.
it's, it's really confounding how he's able to pull both of those off. And it is just because he's able to build this, collage, this kind of gestalt greater than the sum of its parts. Um, that the more I think about it, the more I agree that, yeah, this is considered one of the greatest films of the 20th century. And I
That's exactly what you just said is why I was so drawn into it. Yeah, totally.
um to his ability to weave all these together, and not all these threads are tied up in a bow, most of them aren't.
Yeah.
um but it's such a naturalistic filmmaking style that that's how it be. That's how
Yeah.
life be, you know
And you get this weirdly profound thing of Yang Yang. His new set of photos is just the back of people's heads. And it's like, oh, well, you can't see the back of your own head, so I helped you. And that's like the whole movie right there with perspective. And it's also like, which brings me back to that scene with the people at school making fun of his photos. It's like, why aren't you interested to see the perspective of like a small child with a camera? Like, yeah, this kid doesn't know anything about anything. Isn't that a fascinating thing though to see his perspective anyway? Like you can't see it from that angle. That bugs the shit out of me. A lot of adults just lack the idea of like seeing things creatively from those kinds of angles. I feel like it bugs the
it
shit out.
bugs me, and it's something I try to hold on to, and it's hard.
Yeah.
um I think a lot of people, and I think Edward Yang would agree with me, a lot of people are addicted to the idea of feeling grown up. I really think there's a lot of people who they pursue entire careers because it makes them feel grown up. Careers they may not be interested in, but they don't have anything else. They don't have anything of their own, um, and that's most people. Um, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I mean, most people don't have anywhere they really want to end up. Most people don't have dreams, not really. I think a lot of people say they do and they like to fantasize, but I don't. I think know a lot of people who actually work on them.
Yeah.
Or people's dreams are just to have a family. Um, but
Totally.
there are people, just in my brief running in with the corporate world, where people are very much playing a part, and I feel it talking to people. And I felt out of place. I hated it. I couldn't do it. It made me depressed. We're but then sometimes people aren't that deep. I've also met people where I try to peer beneath the surface and there's nothing, which I hate saying that because it sounds so douchey, and everything I just said sounds so douchey. But that's how it is sometimes.
That's how it is sometimes, you know? Yeah. Like you said, there's some threads that are kind of not tied up. One of those is like the weird subplot that veers into a sudden intense moment, like Fatty murdered somebody. And it comes off abrupt, almost like the ending of A Brighter Summer Day, but you don't really get much of it. Like Ting Ting goes to talk to the police, and I think it's really there to like exacerbate her mental state for when she comes up and like has this like the only moment not grounded in reality is when she has that dream talk with her grandmother who's actually passed on, which is kind of freaky. And it's a very like dreamy moment. And to be like to go from the whiplash of going to talk to the police about a guy you had a crush on killing someone and then saying goodbye to your grandmother and then waking up from a nap and realizing that she had passed is fucking crazy. But
And
it's
that,
pretty
but
cool.
that's what there's the not subtle match cut of, you have the plant that she's had and it started to bud, and then it match cuts to her in bed waking up.
Yeah.
Um, and it's all those trials that I think have started to make her blossom into a woman.
Yes. Totally.
Because it is the difficulties in life that make you grow. And Edward Yang really wanted us to get that.
Totally.
What is up with the brief shot in the newscasts of like a video game recreation of
And
the
I
murder.
was thinking, as soon as I saw that, as soon as they used that to simulate the murder, I was like, I wonder what Scott thinks of this because I don't know what to make of this. But it's interesting that they would choose that. I guess because like the whole movie, NJ is talking with his company about the development of technology and video games and stuff, and how things they don't want to get passed by with this new technology and stuff. I don't know.
I
Something.
think Yang is very concerned with how technology can be used
Yeah.
to either bring people together or push us apart. I definitely get a sense that he's not a fan of violent video games. Ota is a very interesting character because he reminds me so much of Kojima, god damn it. Um of trying to make these games a companion in your life and not just about fighting or killing. That's something
Yeah.
that's said explicitly. And it's said while they're taking an ultrasound of Audie's baby. And so that's an example of technology being used to bring people together. But I think there's all this using advancing technology to flatten culture, um, to go after money regardless of the quality of the product. Yang laments that, and I think I'm willing to bet he thinks the same of cinema. Cinema is obviously very important to him. I'm hoping he's not the kind of pretentious guy who would just write off all blockbusters. Who knows? He's passed away, but surely not. But I think he feels that about cinema too. Because they have the conversation. Fat on their date, Ting Ting and Fatty go on a date to the movies, and they talk about it. And Fatty kind of wants movies that represent the entire range of the human experience, like
Yeah.
Edward Yang's films do, because there are moments of levity in this film for sure. Even though it's mostly drama, but um, there's Ting Ting has almost the more Hollywood approach of I just want escapism.
Yes. She says she thought it was too serious. And he's like, well, you prefer comedies or something? And he's like, come on, that's just how life is, or whatever. It can be funny, it can be serious, or whatever. It could be a mixture of things. And she's just like, well, I don't know. I'm like, damn, and then I was like, at first I was like, wow, Fatty's the real like patrician film buff, like Sigma male.
Well, yeah, but then patrician film buff Sigma males often end up to be incels and kill
And
people
he killed somebody. That's just like
because they're both banging their
wasn't
teeth.
funny, but in my head canon of like that idea of like, because that's such a popular meme. So for him to end up killing somebody, I was like, oh shit, he went too far into this ideal, especially because he does bring up like he he talks about his uncle's view of the impact of like films and like how the way you think about and know movies and how they make you feel like you've lived twice as long. And he uses the example, it's like none of us have murdered, but we all know the idea of what it's like to murder in movies because we've watched them in the movies so much. And
But movies aren't real, and he
exactly.
realizes that.
Yeah.
And Yang realizes that, and he realizes as close as he tries to make it to reality, it never will be. But he
Yeah.
can at least try to use the technology to bring people together and to build empathy, which is going back to what I'm saying of like, well, why read fiction? Because it builds empathy, I think.
Yeah.
And you don't just read about how people live, you can experience how people live
Sure.
and, hopefully get a sense of the emotions or what they were going through at the time if you read, say, a historical novel or even a contemporary novel. And I love seeing movies from other cultures for that same reason,
Of course.
because I can read all about people, just the historical facts, dry bullet points of what happened after the communist revolution in China. But here I get to actually peer into the world of how it was decades later at the turn of the century and how the Chinese people were and still are. Taiwan's in the news plenty nowadays dealing with it.
Yeah.
And not just because of earthquakes. That's not what I meant. But politically it is.
What do
God,
you
I
make?
hope we don't have a war over there.
Yeah, no shit. What do you how do you feel about Yang's speech to his grandmother at the end, which ends the film?
Um, I think it's interesting because in this film we hear mostly diegetic music until the very end. Um, the cousin still doesn't have a name. They mention that newborn baby still doesn't have a name after
Yeah.
what seems like a couple weeks. It's like, all right, come on, you gotta.
Yeah, because like, yeah, they haven't figured it out yet. And they want to make sure it's a lucky name, so they want to like take their time with it or whatever.
Ridiculous
It's
thing they're trying to get this kid out.
crazy.
Um, Yang Yang, he's trying to be adult. And in a way, I think he's trying to play the role of an adult, the way all these people are trying to play roles of different ages. As I talked about with regressing and trying to advance and regress your age. Um, but I do think Yang Yang sort of cleanses himself or even baptizes himself because he's coming into his own with getting into art, being able to think more empathetically through his art. Um,
Yeah, because the whole movie he doesn't have anything to say to his grandmother. And it's not until she dies that he finally feels like he can express himself. And then there's also the point where, like, in the speech, he's saying, like, he knows how she feels, saying that she feels old because now he feels old in reference to his newborn cousin. It's such a silly, childlike thing, but also, like, I don't know.
I get it though.
I get it. Yeah.
And that's the name of this movie. It's one by one, more or less.
Yeah.
Or and the one and the two. There's a few translations you can get,
Yeah.
but things just keep on going. That's the old human comedy, like the Big Lebowski. It's like that speech at the end of that.
Yeah. Beautiful movie. Definitely recommend it. If you were listening to this and you haven't seen it, go watch it.
Yeah, we always say that, but what the fuck are you doing?
Well, you know, they just like, oh, I'm going to listen to these guys talking about a movie I've never
Yeah,
seen.
because I don't feel like watching 3 hours. I will say, when I learned this was 3 hours and not 4 hours, I thought, oh, that's an easy watch compared to Brighter Summer. I was like, 3 hours is nothing. 173
It
minutes.
doesn't even feel like that much of a beast at all to me.
No, it really doesn't.
But yeah, for some reason, yeah, Brighter Summer Day just feels so dense. It's like,
Brighter Summer Days. That's some advanced Kino, man.
yeah, yeah,
I still think it's funny that what's it, Paul Dano, it's his favorite movie because okay, so he's seen that movie at least 4 or 5 times. So he's spent almost probably a full day of his life or more just watching A Brighter Summer Day multiple times. It was
yeah.
beautiful to think about. Good for him. That's why he's such a great actor. But God.
It's just also funny because like we did Evil Dead trilogy around that time, and we were able to fit all three of those in the same time it took to watch A Brighter Summer Day. It's so funny. But that's
Yeah.
what separates us from the weak, the non-patrician. And if you want more Kino content like this, we have hundreds of episodes. We have video essays. We have a tie-in film called The Patrician's Guide to Kino if you want to go crazy on the lore. I wrote a book. You can buy it in the description below to support the channel. You know, we're doing all kinds of stuff around here. Look forward to more stuff. Tell your friends if they've got a boring job and they want to listen to people talk about movies that may be off the more beaten path, recommend us.
Yeah. Follow me at Scott K Comedy.
Yeah,
Um, I'm a hack, but follow me anyway.
he's not a hack. He's too patrician to be a hack.
I'm too patrician to be a hack.
You can't be a self-aware hack. Yes, you can.
No. Yeah, you
Kevin
can.
Smith. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Kevin Smith will admit.
No, you can be a pity party like Kevin Smith. Be like, here's a new Kevin Smith movie that you could ignore. And it's like, dude, have some fucking integrity with your work. I don't
Yeah,
know. That pissed me
I
off.
don't know. Is this an NFT movie? I'll ignore that one.
No, not that one. It was this new movie he announced that he shot on location at his movie theater.
Yeah. I remember reading about that. I forget the name. That'll
But
be
it
it.
was just like he opened it with a new Kevin Smith movie you can ignore. Dude, shut the fuck up. And
Oh, I wish people would ignore me as much as Kevin Smith.
it's like, I don't know. That just rubbed me the wrong way. Like, dude, respect your own work more than that. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week with, I think, the red shoes. So look forward to that. Take care.